Hello, welcome to The Professional Amateur. This is my first episode, so welcome. This episode is entitled The Costs of War. So it's the day after Veterans Day 2019, November the 12th, 2019. If you're a veteran, thank you for your service. I happen to be a veteran. I served in the Air Force from 2002 through 2005. I did not serve in combat. And I think that's a big distinction to make. I am a veteran, but I'm not a combat veteran. So I really want to I make that distinction whenever someone thanks me for my service. I say, well, I was in the service, but I did not serve in combat. So I think there's a big distinction there. I really wanted to make this video just because I think it's very important to be informed. And I see on Veterans Day sadly, a lot of vitriol going back and forth between the people who are pro-military and people who are anti-military. And I really want to tackle this debate from a place of center ground and say we need to look at the facts. So I really wanted to show a couple articles about the costs of war. I don't care whether you're pro-military or you're anti-military. I don't care. But I do want you to be informed. So I see a lot of people fighting online, and I think that it's really important to look at some facts and judge when looking at something as complex as this issue. It's a very, very big and complex issue. So I have a few links here. I'll share them in the show notes. Go ahead and look at them and read them. I'm going to start with a map from the Smithsonian, smithsonian.com, on a series they have going called America at War. So here is an infographic, which I'll post in the show notes. 80 total countries engaged through 40 U.S. military bases, 65 counterterrorism training operations, 26 military exercises, 14 U.S. troops in combat, 7 air and drone strikes. So we have U.S. involvement all over the place. We have bases all over the place. This graphic kind of shows you. The big thing that people don't know, and I think people need to be aware of this, is that there's a big war. There's a war going on in Yemen. There's also combat operations that have been going on in Niger, in Mali, in West Africa here. I can't even pronounce that. That's terrible. Mauritania. Combat operations in Cameroon. Combat operations in Kenya, Central African Republic, Somalia, obviously Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. All these little orange bubbles here are combat operations. In Saudi Arabia, combat operations. So I think it's very important to be aware that the United States has military bases and military presence all over the planet. South America too. So here's a little, South America, Cuba, Caribbean, Colombia, Brazil, Argentina. And these are training and assistance missions here. So I just think people need to be aware, because a lot of Americans aren't aware of the scope of the military presence of the United States around the globe. And they're just not aware of what other countries think of about that. So I studied in Germany and lived in northern Germany in 2008 and 2009. And it really opened my eyes as to how we're viewed as Americans from the rest of the world. And it's a lot different once you live abroad. So I'm not trying to be, pro or anti or anything. I just want people to be aware. I want you to be informed so you can make your own decisions. So take a look at this map and just be informed. Next thing I want to look at, also from Smithsonian.com, new poll of U.S. troops and veterans reveals their thoughts on current military policies. If you want to support your veterans, it'd be good to know what they actually want. So I think there's a few interesting things in here. Most veterans actually support the war on terror, overwhelmingly. Most veterans don't support transgender people in the military. But that's a split between male and female and between generations. This poll was from veterans and from active duty, officer and enlisted, male and female. So it's a rather wide poll. It's not a huge poll, but I think it's a good one to look at. 70% support the deployment of female troops in ground combat. That's interesting. That's changed a lot over the years. So I'm not going to go through all these. There's a whole bunch of interesting ones in here. The two big ones that I think are really interesting is here. The current occupation of Afghanistan has been going on too long. 84% of military respondents agree to that. 84% think that we've been in Afghanistan too long. The current occupation of Iraq has been going on too long. 84% agree we've been in Iraq and Afghanistan for too long. Now, some disagree. Some think it's fine. But the majority of military respondents in this particular poll think that we've been in Iraq and Afghanistan too long. I think that's, that's a big deal. We should look at what the troops actually think. And then two other things I want to show really quick, so as not to go super long. This website, The Cost of War, if you look it up, I'll share it in the show notes. It's got a lot of good information. 20 years of, let me go back one to the main website. It's got 20 years of research about the cost of war, America's war on terror. So there's a few things on the summary that I just wanted to point out. And this is just for your information. I'm not trying to be biased. I'm just trying to give information. So over 480,000 people have died due to direct war violence. It's likely that many more times have died indirectly due to malnutrition, damage of infrastructure, and environmental degradation. 244,000 civilians have been killed in direct violence by all parties to these conflicts. 244,000 civilians. So I want to highlight that because combat personnel don't bear the brunt of the violence of war. Civilians do. Civilians do. Non-combatants die in droves in every war, and that's throughout history. So I just think people need to be aware of that. Almost 7,000 U.S. soldiers have died so far. That's tragic, The other big one here, many deaths and injuries among U.S. contractors have not been reported as required by law, but it is likely that at least 7,800 have been killed. So that's more than the combat troops, guys. More contractors have probably died in Iraq and Afghanistan and in our wars, the wars on terror, than have soldiers. And most people don't know that. I think you need to know. And the last statistic I want to read here, 21 million Afghani, Iraqi, Pakistani, and Syrian people are living as war refugees. That's a huge deal. So the refugee crisis in Europe is largely caused by our war policies. And whether you're pro or anti-war, it's a problem. And we need to look at the full picture. So if there is a refugee problem, if there is an immigration problem, how much of that is caused by war, right? And I'm not saying all of it is, but we need to look at it. And then the last thing is federal spending on war. So look at, this is nationalpriorities.org, budget basics. This is an older federal budget, but it's pretty indicative of our normal federal budget. So I'm going to zoom in on a bigger picture of it. This will also be a link in the show notes. Obviously, the most money we spend out of the 2015 budget, 3.8 trillion, was on Social Security, unemployment, and labor. The next big chunk was on Medicare and health. And third is military spending. Military spending is huge. So, but it's still dwarfed by Social Security and Medicare and health, which is more than half of that. So the other thing that I want people to take a notice of here is interest on the debt is 6% as of 2015. 6% of our budget was interest on the debt. Interest on the debt for war, health, and Social Security and all the other spending is taking up 6% of our budget. So that's more than food, education, transportation, housing, international affairs, energy, and science, not combined, but it's more than those individually. That's insane. The interest on the debt is more than the spending on any individual program of food, education, transportation, and housing. That should worry you if you do some math. This part, the interest on the debt, is going to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow and become a larger and larger and larger piece of this pie over the next 10 years, to the point where the interest on the debt is going to exceed the spending of military probably by the end of this decade, right? And that's if interest rates don't go up. So that's a problem. So that's the last problem I wanted to point out. So all of this stuff's in the show notes. These are the costs of war. I want people to know You know, war costs lives, it costs money. And then one big thing here is compelling. The last thing I'll leave you with is, if you're interested, there are compelling alternatives to war. We didn't really consider those in the aftermath of 9/11 or in the discussion about war in Iraq. Some of those alternatives are still available. So if you're interested, go click on those alternatives. Follow the show notes and look at the alternatives to war. Thanks for listening. If you like this, if it's interesting to you, if you want to see more of it, like it and share it. If you don't like it, don't give it a thumbs down and tell me I suck. But if you respond, I would be grateful. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it, guys. Once again, happy Veterans Day.